Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The Browns beat the Bears 26-6 on Sunday with a historic defensive performance to improve to 2-1. OBJ returned, Kareem Hunt ran angry, and Myles Garrett reminded everyone how good he can be. Joining me to talk about it all is Dave Chudowsky of the WKYC Morning News. Dave, how are you?
Scott, I'm doing great. Another win, another victory Monday yesterday, so that was excellent. And then I'm feeling good right now. I was just telling you before we started here, I just went to Core Cleveland on Columbia in Westlake, and I just did a workout that was tremendous. It was a Versa climber. Oh my! I'm telling you what, man. Talk about a workout. So if anyone is looking for something different, check it out. I highly recommend it. I am going to be a little sore, but that's all right.
Maybe that'll be the inspiration I need to get off of my recliner today, Chud, and go get a little run in today.
I think it should be. I think that's the inspiration. I got to tell you, man, working out it's huge for me mentally and physically. And, if anyone's looking, that's get a little motivation, not you, but just anybody. You think Myles Garrett isn't working out? Of course he is, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I saw him without his shirt on. He did his interview Friday with no shirt on. So I'm convinced that he's working out. Now, the Browns keep me too busy. That's my excuse for not working out as much as I should. It's probably a garbage excuse, and there's plenty of time. But, Myles.
Well, it's garbage because you find your way to the golf course any chance you get.
Well,
so I mean,
you got to have priorities, Judd.
You do. I'm glad you brought up the Garrett thing because I thought about that. After that happened, I'm like, I can't wait to talk to you about it, and I want to get your opinion on that. But that can come down the line here. But one thing I wanted to say is, one thing I feel like, especially on Twitter, it's all about people love to pat themselves on the back, right? and you get that on the radio shows. And one thing I've always prided us in is I feel like we try to keep it as real as possible. Sometimes we'll, fall for, I'm looking for the word, you fall in the trap or you don't see things coming. I mean, listen, no one's going to ever get it right. And that's the bottom line. We will tell you that. We will get things wrong. But so far, we're both 3-0 on our picks. But I also want to make it clear, we're not here to try to help you win money. If you want to go to Vegas and win money, we're not your guys. I'm 0-3 in Vegas. You're 1-2. But we're both 3-0 on our picks. And I actually hit the Browns score 2 weeks in a row. I had 26.
Yeah, so, that's pretty good. I mean, it's really good. They call that in the press box. We call that a nostril. If you get half the score right, instead of a noser, if the noser is you get the whole score right, the nostril's half the score.
And you were right there. You were at 27.
27, yeah.
We were a point off with the Chiefs in week 1. So, You know what? I'm here to pat you on the back. And if I'm going to have to do it to myself, I will as well.
Well, I appreciate that, Chud. The thing about that game against the Bears, right? You try to figure out, okay, how's it going to play out? And obviously, nobody knows exactly, right? I mean, Bill Belichick's good at figuring that out. But I just figured Justin Fields would be able to make some plays. The Browns defense had not been very good through 2 weeks, right? We talked about that a ton. We saw what he did at Ohio State. You saw him play a little bit in those first couple of games. He's got a good arm. He can run. I figured they'd be able to make some plays, and I like the Bears defense. And we saw that, for a good chunk of that game Sunday. I mean, the Browns only had 3 points until a minute left in the first half. So I felt like it was going to be a closer game. I just had no idea that Chicago's game plan would be as bad as it was. And then Fields would not be able to overcome that, right? I mean, the line was bad for the Bears, the play calling, the scheme, all of it was bad. And then Fields just couldn't do anything to rescue it. And that's how you get a lopsided score and an easy cover, right? That's just what I did not see coming. I thought the Browns would struggle to score because that Bears defense is legit. And the Browns did struggle to score. 26 is, that's still a good number, but it's not an unbelievable number. But I thought the Bears would be able to score more, and they just obviously were so inept. And the Browns had a lot to do with that. I'm not taking anything away from Myles Garrett or Jadeveon Clowney or JOK, any of the guys we're going to talk about. But I just thought Chicago would be able to do something and they just didn't do anything.
Well, and that's where we're honest with everyone. I mean, we're going to let you know. I mean, listen, we picked the Browns to win, but neither of us had them covering. You know, I had 26-20, you had 27-20, and I think we both felt the same way. I felt like especially after the Bears, the way they played the Bengals. And that's the key here, a rookie quarterback. We both thought he was going to play better. So I'm going to, in my opinion, I want yours. Was that win and the defensive effort, was that more the Browns defense? Was that more on Fields and how they prepared and had him get out there in the game plan? Was it a combination of both? Because listen, if anyone is going to tell you that was just the Browns being dominant on defense, I think that's a disservice, because as dominant as they were, and I feel much better about their D, trust me, that was one of the worst quarterback performances I've seen in a long time, if not ever.
Yeah, I'm going to go with combination, right? I mean, it's always a combination, but if I had to lean somewhere, I might lean toward Chicago failure. And I say that because Matt Nagy just didn't help, and he's the Bears coach. He just didn't help Fields. Like, there were not designed runs. I mean, the guy's a big-time athlete. And yes, the Browns' ends are good, and yes, the Browns knew what Chicago was going to try to do, but I didn't feel there was any serious attempt by the Bears to get Fields outside the pocket, to use him as a running threat. And once he would have had a little success doing that, then I think Joe Woods, the defensive coordinator for the Browns, would have had to dial things back, right? You have to adjust. You probably have to play a little safer so you don't give up the running plays. But without that being a threat, they just went after him. And, you know, it didn't feel like Myles Garrett was worried about Fields running away. You know, I mean, he lined up inside and he, you know, crashed down the middle, and they dominated the offensive line, but like, I just felt at some point the Browns said, you know what, we're just not worried about anything. We're not worried about him dropping back. We're not worried about him escaping. And that made life easier on the Browns. Obviously the Bears offensive line is a weakness, and Matt Nagy did not help it, right? Jason Peters, a left tackle. Myles Garrett called him a Hall of Famer before the game. And maybe he will be a Hall of Famer, but he's old, and Myles ran by him multiple times. The guard, Myles would line up over the guard and beat the guard. And my point is, Myles talked last Friday when we talked to him. He talked so much about how the Texans chipped him more than he's ever been chipped before. And he grew frustrated with that, and he grew frustrated because his teammates weren't taking advantage of their one-on-ones. And it was an interesting topic for Myles, and you wonder, you know, was he talking out of school? To me, it felt like more Myles was trying to motivate the guys around him, and including motivate himself into, okay, let's have a game. But the Bears didn't take that. They didn't follow that game plan of the Texans. They did not chip Myles a ton and get him frustrated and take him out of his game and make somebody else beat them. Instead, I mean, I rewatched the game, and I'm not saying I watched every snap to see if Myles was chipped, but I know on one of the sacks he was, and it was a terrible chip by the running back. And then Peters tried to cut him low, and it didn't work, and it wound up being an easy sack for Garrett. But most plays that I watched and paid attention to, Garrett was not getting double teamed or chipped. And if you're only going to go with a 5-man protection with the rookie quarterback, you put him in harm's way. And that's exactly what Matt Nagy did to Justin Fields, and the Browns took advantage. So, you know, yeah, the Browns played well. It was a huge improvement. I think it quiets a lot of the questions about Joe Woods and how, you know, the Browns coming together as a defense. But I would have liked to see, I just would like to see Justin Fields be better protected and put in a better situation. I think that would give you a more fair evaluation of the Browns defense.
Yeah, it's a good take. I don't know if that's necessarily the more popular take around Cleveland, but I think that's fair to say, because I really believe if you had a competent, and listen, I think Fields is going to be okay. At least, I mean, I would think so. Mm-hmm. But I just feel like if there was a veteran quarterback there, it may have been a different story. But you're right, though. But part of that's the way, like you said, the coaching scheme and the game plan. It was bizarre. It was bizarre to watch. But I guess at the end of the day, here's the thing: who cares?
Right.
That the result has to be good for this defense meshing, and that's what we talked about last week.
Well, yeah, and I mean, you can't get it. I mean, I don't want to downplay or dismiss or undervalue the 1 net yard passing, right? And the 47 net yards total for the Bears. I mean, those are historic numbers. It's a franchise records for the Browns. So
Incredible.
Not every defense would have done that, right, to Justin Fields. He would have had a better day against a bunch of other defenses, but the Browns played really well. And Myles Garrett can wreck a game, and he can dominate any week, especially when, the offenses don't pay him enough attention and give him one-on-ones. He will dominate in those situations and did just that. And then we saw it across the defense. Jadeveon Clowney had 2 sacks, 5 quarterback hits, hadn't had a sack since 2019. Played pretty well, I thought, against the Chiefs. Didn't show up a ton against the Texans, had a couple of hits. But really, I thought this was his breakout game with the Browns. Great to see. You're going to need him as that bookend to Myles Garrett. JOK, I thought, was all over the place. I think he played 23 snaps or 25 snaps, but I think it was 23 or 45. And the Browns only had 45 defensive snaps, which, that's a small number. And they had 81 on offense, which just shows you the lopsidedness of the game. But JOK, he was flying around. He made plays in coverage. He had 2 passes defensed. I just wanted to make sure I was right on that. It's 23 out of 45. Making plays in pass coverage, made plays in the run game. He had a stop on 3rd and 2 early that forced a field goal. We saw him get half a sack when Myles Garrett wanted the whole sack. But it was interesting. JOK was playing off the line. His guy, I think he was responsible for the running back. The running back stayed in to block somebody else. JOK had nothing to do, so he blitzed and gets the half a sack with Myles Garrett. So, I thought those guys played well. The secondary played better. Ronnie Harrison showed up. It was just an overall outstanding effort. And I don't want to take too much away from the Browns at all. I'm just saying Matt Nagy did have a role in the Browns being as good as they were.
Go back to Garrett last week. When you walked away from that interview, was there any concern at all about, what he said? And it was like, wasn't it bizarre? I wasn't there. You were. No shirt on. And it was an interesting interview, right?
Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure we've interviewed Myles shirtless before. So it wasn't anything that I hadn't seen. It was a little different that he was outside. Usually, you can get guys will be in different states of dress if you're interviewing them in the locker room, but this was outside. So that was a little bit weird. And he was wearing a winter hat. So that was, it's a weird combination, shirtless with a winter hat on.
I've seen you do that before.
Yeah, no, you have not. You have not, Chud. I don't go shirtless very often and don't wear winter hats hardly ever. So, but to get back to Myles, the comments were certainly interesting, right? Like the fact that he came out and was like, yeah, they chipped me more than anybody else. Than I've ever been chipped before. Okay, so that's Myles. Some people on Twitter react, oh, he's making excuses. I think there's part of that is there, he needs an explanation for why he didn't show up in the stats, but it's also reality, right? They pay him other teams pay him a ton of attention. Laramie Tunsil's a good player. But I thought it was a funny quote when he said, I get paid too much and Tunsil gets paid too much for them to double team me as much as they did. We're kind of taking away the fun of the matchup. So those are some interesting insights into Myles. But then when he said, yeah, I'm frustrated that my teammates didn't take advantage and they didn't make the plays. I think that could be taken the wrong way, but seeing how the Browns played and how Myles played, and it felt like how his teammates reacted to him on Sunday, I don't think it was anything he didn't say behind closed doors. I think he just wanted that message out there that, hey, if we're going to be the team we think we're going to be, and if we're going to be the front four that needs to dominate, then I need help. And if I'm getting double and triple teamed, you guys need to step up. And it's an interesting take, and it's a take that I think could rub some guys the wrong way, but I haven't gotten that sense. And, if we're just going by results, it worked out because they had 9 sacks.
So if you are giving out 3 game balls, and we haven't talked about this, obviously Garrett's getting one of them.
Yep.
Who are the other 2 game balls?
Kareem Hunt, 155 yards, huge on that touchdown drive at the end of the first half. I mean, it's a 3-3 game, right? And then Hunt goes down and leads that 2-minute drive, and they score on the Baker to Hooper, touchdown with I'm looking it up, 19 seconds left in the half, makes it 10-3. Huge play in the game. The Bears are starting the second half with the ball. So Hunt was big on that drive. And then in the second half, he helped put the game away. That 29-yard touchdown run was huge. Baker talked about him playing angrier than usual. And while we're talking about Kareem, before I give you my other game ball, I thought it was weird that Demetric Felton was the third down back on 2 third downs on those first couple of drives. I know that Jarvis Landry wasn't there, and that Felton was doing a little bit of the Jarvis role. And they ran that kind of funky motion in the backfield and threw him the swing pass, and he got tackled for no gain. And we've seen them run that play to Jarvis before. And they ran a wheel route to Felton, like they'd set it up. Like he was a guy, this is a play they're working on. And Baker just overthrew him, and it should have been a touchdown. So that's not right. That's not Felton's fault. It's not Stefanski's fault. It's the right play call. But my overall point is third down back belongs to Kareem Hunt. He's too good to take away any or many of those reps to give to a rookie. And I know Demetric Felton's shown some things, right? He had a good game returning. He had a 33-yard touchdown against the Texans. I don't care. Kareem Hunt's a better player, and I'm not taking him off the field unless it's a special circumstance. And, I think Kevin Stefanski probably realizes it. It was only a couple of plays, so maybe I'm making too big a deal of it. But it stood out to me at the time, and this is before Kareem went nuts, and I was telling Tom Withers next to me, they got to get Kareem in the game. Felton should not be taking his reps. So that's just a strong opinion I have. I think it'll go back to being all Kareem's. And again, it was only a couple of snaps, but it stood out to me because it's so early in the game, and then the Browns wound up failing on those 2 fourth down attempts.
Yeah, but here's my question for you. And while I agree with pretty much 95% of what you said, and you did say it wasn't Felton's fault, if Baker hits him, then Stefanski looks like a genius there for that play.
He does, but I think you could run the same play with Kareem. I'm not sure the coverage is any different if Kareem's in the backfield. Maybe there's a little more attention paid to him. Like, that's why I'm kind of hedging on this, because my thought is that Kareem would have gotten the same coverage because they ran it last year. I mean, they ran the same play last year and Baker hit him. But, if you're Stefanski, you're probably thinking, hey, I can put my rookie back there. They're going to cover him with a linebacker. We're going to win the matchup and score. And I understand that. But then he followed it up with another third down, and they ran that swing pass. And it was probably meant for Jarvis in an original game plan, and they just put Felton in. I just did not like seeing Kareem Hunt not being on the field on third down. I mean, that's the bottom line for me. And then to finish your question, my third game ball, I mean, there's a bunch of candidates, but I'm going to go Odell. We talked so much about his return, and he did not disappoint. He plays 52 snaps, catches 5 passes for 77 yards, a team high, 1 end around for 10 yards, picks up a first down, drew 2 holding penalties on the defense. To me, it was obvious that the Bears were worried about Odell having a huge impact on the game, and that changes the rest of how the offense can play. It frees up other things. He's still a threat, and it's only his first game back, and he's only going to get better.
Okay, I can't argue that, but he would get my 4th ball. I'm giving the 3rd game ball to the kicker.
Oh, yeah. See, it completely set my mind. It's probably my bias, just natural bias against kicking, I guess. But that's a great point. That's a great point. He was great. I mean, 4 for 4, 57 and 52.
Because just think about how bad, kicking has been since Dawson has left. And, if you start getting that, 50-yarders, oh my gosh. I mean, that's incredible. Because, we always joke about how, we used to have the amazing left tackle and kicker, but nothing else.
Right.
And then we, we're struggling in those 2 areas, which, by the way, we'll get to left tackle here in a minute. But, yeah, I just think McLaughlin, that was fun to watch. And they were important field goals.
Yeah.
No,
that's a great call. That's a great call. He should be in there. I should probably take OBJ out of there because, in big picture wise, I mean, we've talked about, the uncertainty revolving McLaughlin, right? Heading into the season. How long is he going to, is it his job? If he struggles early, do they bring in a replacement? And I thought the performance, and not just yesterday, I mean, he hasn't missed a kick in 3 games. I think he's really earned the trust of the coaching staff and earned time where if he goes out and misses a kick or two, people are going to be upset, but I don't feel like the Browns would be in a rush to make a move. I think he's earned himself a little bit of a leash here, and that's what happens when you make 57 and 52 yarders.
Yeah. Back to Odell. Can you help me out here? How much did you watch being in the press box? You get, and I know this from being up there for years, I'm not there anymore, but you can watch things that you can't see on TV, right? How much did Odell route running was in the middle of the field as compared near the sidelines? Did you pay any attention to that?
Yeah, it's interesting. And then I went and rewatched, the game yesterday. I would say the majority on the sidelines, there were a couple of incompletions where Baker threw him away, threw it out of bounds, or the one was just a little too far out of bounds. And actually, it's probably Odell's best play. He went up along the sideline, made a really good catch, but the throw had taken him out of bounds. He ran a stop route on the sideline. He ran a triple move comeback where you couldn't tell, the corner couldn't tell if he was eventually going to take off on a deep route or come back. I think it's the same route they ran last year for that touchdown against the Bengals on that Thursday night. And this time they ran it as a comeback, and it was an easy completion. I mean, there's so much separation. So I would say the majority on the sideline, but, he ran the slant on the second play that there should have been a penalty called on Roquan for the Bears. He caught his first catch was on the third play, and it was a little, curl hook route out of the left slot. So that counts as over the middle. He caught another in route. He caught a slant. So I'd say the sideline, but it wasn't like it was one-dimensional. He was across the field.
What was big for me watching is when they did the end around when he ran the ball.
Yeah.
Because that just tells me that he has full mental confidence and the coaching staff does too. Don't you think? Or am I wrong on that?
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think you're exactly right. And I think it also speaks to some of the dynamics that he brings to this offense that we've talked about it that were missing when he got hurt last year. The fact that he can run, and Anthony Schwartz, the rookie speedster at Auburn, brings you some of that, right? But when Schwartz is on the field, it feels a little bit like, okay, we got to watch out for this guy, right? Odell's always going to be on the field. So the defense doesn't change just because he's lined up wide. And then if you're able to run an end around, with the fake reverse action, that just adds another thing for defenses to worry about. It opens things up for the run game. If you see Odell going on that action, then the defense has to hold wide, right? And it opens up lanes in the middle, I feel like, for the running game. So that's what they were missing last year. And I think that's an area that Kevin Stefanski is really looking to exploit with Odell, because I think it has a huge impact on the rest of what he can call and what he can scheme.
Is Myles Garrett the best player on the team? I know Stefanski made a comment. I mean, is that, when he answered that, was that the whole team or just the defense?
No, it's the whole team. And he said that last year. I think it was an interview on his coaching show where he called Myles the best player on the team. And, I get that maybe it hits the ears wrong, or not, maybe you're not wrong, but it hits your ears, right? I'm like, that's a bold statement to call somebody on your 53-man roster the best player. But having been around that team, having been around Myles, I think that's a consensus, might be too strong a word, but I really feel like that's the general feeling among the team. And it's not all about production. It's about talent and potential. And when you rank players among positions, right, Myles Garrett is in that discussion for best defensive ends in the league. Baker's not there yet with quarterbacks. Nick Chubb is there with running backs. And Odell at one point was there with receivers, right? And now he's had so many injuries that I don't think it's fair to put him in that discussion. So therefore, if you're talking about best players on your team, it's Myles Garrett and Nick Chubb. And I think Myles is just such a special athlete that he gets that's why Stefanski would say that unapologetically. And, Myles thinks he's the best player in the league, right? I mean, I talked to him before the season. I wrote a big story. Like, he thinks he should be, he was upset he was ranked 16th or whatever it was in the NFL Network rankings. Like, he believes he's the most talented player in the league. Well,
I want him to think that. I want him to go out there and act like that because he has the talent to definitely be.
Right. Well, then the transitive property is if you're the best player in the league, you better be the best player on your team, right? Or whatever property that is.
Point.
So, it's an interesting statement. It's not new. It's not new that Stefanski said it. And I don't think it would set off any alarms inside the building. When you ask other teammates about like the freakish athlete, it's always Myles. Like, he's the guy that everybody looks to. And it's because he's 6'4", 275, and he bends and runs like he does. So, yeah, it was interesting, but I think it's just kind of an affirmation of what Myles thinks of himself, really.
And I knew that you would bring up Chubb, and that's leading me into my next question then. I mean, what a joy it was to watch Kareem Hunt and to know that. I just think, man, I'll tell you, when I watch these running backs, it's – yeah, and I had a feeling you would bring up Chubb when I asked that question. That leads me into my next topic here is it is such a joy to watch these running backs. And when I watch them, that's when I really believe, man, this offense can't be stopped because it's just hard to believe that those running backs, both of them can be stopped on any Sunday. And, when Chubb did you think Chubb was stopped? I mean, I didn't think he had a terrible game, but it definitely, it wasn't his normal type game.
No, it wasn't. And I think it was like 5 carries for 11 yards in the first quarter, something like that. But he finishes with 22 for 84. 3.8 is obviously below his season average of 5-something. He didn't have a lot of room to run early, and that's because of that Bears front that we talked about. It's a legit front seven. And then I just think as the game went on, Kareem had such a head of steam going that he got a good number of carries. He had obviously had success, but then when they needed Chubb late in the game to control the clock, that's when he had his best runs. Like I said, finishes with 84 yards. The team finishes with 215. So, it was nothing about Chubb. It was, if you're getting hit behind the line of scrimmage every time, it's tough to gain yardage. And I think that's just the way it was going to be against this Bears defense early is their stout front. But your point's well taken. I mean, that's why the Browns have such a dynamic offense, is because they have those two backs. They have a good quarterback. They have targets for the quarterback, right? And it's just a matter of figuring out the best way each week to maximize all those weapons and to play the game the most efficient and effective way. And Stefanski talked about it afterward. I mean, the easy formula that he wants to do is be aggressive on defense, score early, get a lead, and then turn it over to the run game, right? So the variable there is, how do you get the lead early? Do you do it throwing? Do you do it running right off the gate? But in the second half, you want to be in a position where you can turn it over to those two guys and say, let's finish out this ballgame.
Boy, that's a great point. Yeah, no question. How was the energy in the building, man? It looked like it was rocking, and that's definitely something that you can look forward to, is having that really be a home field advantage.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And it's interesting. I think we touched on this last week. Stefanski keeps bringing it up. Like he's like giving pep talks to the fans every Friday because he really feels like it can be, a benefit for the team. And I think he knows that it hasn't been there recently just because the Browns have been so bad. So he's really harping on that. And then there were a couple moments that stood out to me. At halftime, it was Legends weekend. So DeQuell Jackson gave a little speech that I thought got the fans geeked up. And then Josh Cribbs, the quote was something like, it was my greatest honor to play, bleed, and win for Browns fans. And, and it's a great sentiment. And I really believe Josh believes that because he left everything on the field. But I think that was that got the crowd riled up. And then the Myles Garrett chants in the fourth quarter were loud. They were cool. And I think they really touched Myles. I mean, he talked about it after the game. He tweeted about it. I think that really had an effect on him. And he talks about, making his home here and wanting to be here forever. And something like that, I think, is a moment that kind of cements that feeling for Myles.
Yeah, and we know how fans fall in love with guys when they really love this city. And, and you can tell, and that they want to stay, they're not going to leave. And not that we have that problem too much with football players. That's another sport that we deal with that. But speaking of that, another sport, man, you are so right on the ball. You told me last night to check out the Manning brothers on Monday Night Football. They had LeBron on last night. I go to bed really early. This will probably freak people out when I tell them I get up at about 2:30, 2:45 in the morning. Yeah, that's what's freaky. Yeah, it is freaky, right? But I lost like an hour of sleep last night because I could not stop watching the Manning brothers. Man, you were the one who told me about it, that I had to check it out. Man, it was awesome.
They're fantastic. I don't know if it's for everyone, but everyone I've talked about has loved it. Because you have to watch the game yourself because they're not breaking down each play all the time. So, you could miss something if you're just focused on them. But, if you're used to watching football, first of all, they give great insight. And I mean, I picked up a bunch of things about zone coverage and man coverage and what the quarterback's looking for. Yesterday, Peyton said he hates throwing the bubble screen to the wide receiver against man because it's too easy to for the defenders to fight through blocks. He only likes throwing it against off coverage man. He didn't like press man. He likes the off coverage. And he said he doesn't like it as a play call. He likes to be able to audible to it if he sees the perfect coverage. I just thought that was interesting. And there's a bunch of those every week, and they're funny. They have a great rapport between the two of them. They have good guests, right? LeBron and Nick Saban and Matthew Stafford and Chris Long. I would much, I can't say how many times, rather watch them than just a normal broadcast. And I got nothing against the normal broadcast. I like Louis Riddick. Brian Greasy's fine. But I'm infatuated with the Mannings. And now the problem is they're going to take like 3 weeks off. So you got to go back to watching normal Monday Night Football.
Yeah. I mean, Eli was dancing. He was ripping Peyton for having, sweaty armpits. I don't know if you saw that. It was hilarious. I mean, just the way they're ribbing each other and their personalities. Oh, man. And the LeBron interview, if we could we'll get back to the Browns here. I just got to stray away for a minute. But watching the LeBron interview, I don't know if everyone caught it. Peyton asked him they asked great questions too. And I wonder if someone's in their ear telling them to ask these questions, if they're written down before, or if these guys actually think on their own. I'm going to guess it's probably a combination of both. But he asked him about Tom Brady returning to Foxborough, right? To take on that game's in New England, right? Sunday night.
Yep.
Yeah. So Brady's returning to Foxborough, and he talked about he asked LeBron what it was like to return to Cleveland. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. I don't really ever remember LeBron opening up as much about that as he did last night, because that was back in 2010, and he talked about how he didn't sleep the night before and the nerves and how he had to quiet the crowd. And I was there for that game, and I could do a whole podcast with you on LeBron and covering the Cavs, right? But I'll never, Scott, I'm telling you right now, you've been to so many football games, they kind of run together a little bit, right? I mean, it happens. I mean, you remember them, but like there's just certain ones that stick out. That night is in my top 5 moments of my life that stick out, because the venom and hatred in that building for him, and just you could cut it. I know it's cliche, but you could cut it with a knife. Like you almost could physically see the energy and the hatred, and the way the fans were just so angry with him. And I remember he didn't run out for the intros. When the Heat were there, he didn't run out. Everyone got introduced but him. And I asked him after the game, I said, "Hey, LeBron, where were you for the?" I didn't care about how he played or any other stuff. I just wanted to know how he thought about it. And he goes, "What? Can I go to the bathroom?" So I thought that was pretty funny. Come on, LeBron, you didn't have to go to the bathroom. You didn't want to face the music. You didn't want,
funny. Yeah, he didn't want to get booed. Yeah.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, and it was, oh man, he got booed big time, right? But he it was interesting to see him open up last night about that and talking about playing football. And anyway, I totally got off track. I apologize, but I had to give you credit for that because you were so on the ball on that with how good it is.
Yeah, I recommend that for anybody when they come back. I think it's, I don't know, week 6 or 7, they're coming back, and they got some good games when they come back. Because they're not going to do all the whole season. But yeah, I do recommend it. I just think it's a great watch.
Back to the Browns. Bring us up to date on injuries. We always need to know where we stand there.
Yeah, we don't know yet about Greg Newsom. He left in the 4th quarter with a calf injury, and I went back and, you didn't notice anything on the field. I went back and watched on the replay, and, he plays 3rd down. He looks fine. He stays on the field for the punt, and they show him walk off the field, and he looks okay, right? So part of me says that's a great sign and that it's not a serious injury. Stefanski wouldn't really go there yesterday when we asked about the MRI. Said he hadn't had the results back. He let us know Wednesday. So, any injury you're concerned about, hopefully it's not anything significant. Maybe he misses a week or 2, but it's too early even for me to speculate on that. So he's the big one.
Didn't he tweet something?
Yeah, he tweeted, "I'll be good," but that could mean anything, right? That's a better than "oh my gosh," right? But does that mean he'll be good this week? Does it mean he'll be good, in a month?
Don't you love Twitter?
But yeah, it gives you some insight, and you're like, oh, and then you really think about it. It's like, why? He hadn't even had the MRI yet. So, but it's encouraging to some level. So he's the biggest one, and they got Greedy Williams would take over for Greg, starting outside. And he's a starting level caliber cornerback, and that's what Troy Hill said yesterday. The nickelback, we talked to him. The Browns, Andrew Berry went out and got depth at corner because it's such an important position because they didn't have enough depth last year, and having Greedy Williams able to fill in if necessary is really important. 2nd round pick, has talent. Now you still need to see him play well, but it's nice to have him, and I think the Browns feel pretty comfortable having Williams able to step in if need be. And then the only other big injury that we know of, at least, is Jedrick Wills, and it's not even that. It's big because he's an important player. He's your left tackle, but Jedrick Wills Jr. aggravated that ankle. Happened in the first half. It was the 2nd quarter, and kind of was in and out of the lineup the rest of the day. He played, I think, 70 of 81 snaps. Blake Hance played the other 11. So, it's a question of, can he just keep playing through it, and will it get better? And then what happens if he dings it again or if somebody falls on it again? Those are the kind of questions the medical staff and the coaches have to deal with. But, if it's not a high ankle and it's just this low ankle and you're an offensive lineman, that's the thing I think, the kind of thing I think your teammates and coaches expect you to play through, just because offensive linemen, they don't miss snaps. We see J.C. Treader playing on a bum knee every week. Your ankle better be really limiting what you can do for you to sit out.
It's a mentality, right?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. All right, you ready to move on to Minnesota?
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Vikings coming off a win over Seattle, 1-2 on the season. Obviously, this game is in Minnesota. After the Browns win 2 on the road, they go back on the road. The Browns are 0-1 on the road as they lost in Kansas City. So where do you want to start first? You want to break down the Vikings, or do you want to talk about the elephant in the room, and that's Stefanski returning to take on his former team?
Yeah, we can start there. It's going to be interesting to see how much he reveals this week. He got asked about it Monday on the Zooms and was, no, the Vikings are a great team. We got to take them seriously. It was really all he would say about it. But he's going to be asked a bunch. I expect him to talk to Minnesota reporters this week. They'll ask him a bunch about it. And it's just too big a storyline for him to dismiss it completely. He can downplay it all he wants. But the reality is he spent 14 years there. That's the only other place he's been in his NFL career. It's a huge rarity, right? Guys don't spend that long in one spot as an assistant coach. and he survived a bunch of coaching changes, kept working his way up the ranks. Obviously impressed a bunch of people on the way before he becomes a Browns head coach. So you have that element of it, right? His kids were born there, all those things, the personal side of it. And then from a football side, I mean, he knows all these guys on the roster, right? Or not all the guys, because he's been gone for a year plus now. But, I mean, he knows Kirk Cousins, right? He knows Adam Thielen. You know, you just go down the list. He knows the guys on defense. He knows their strengths and weaknesses. And, you know, we can debate how important that is, but it obviously plays a role in the game. Not to mention the coordinator that took his spot, Clint Kubiak, or Clint Kubiak's the coordinator this year. Gary, his dad, I believe, was a coordinator a year ago with the Vikings. They all run the same system. Like Stefanski took this Kubiak system, which is the Shanahan system, and brought it to Cleveland. And the Vikings are still running it. So, like, the offenses look the same. They're real similar. So you have all these elements in play, and it's going to be a storyline all week. And I'm just curious to see how much Stefanski is willing to open up about any and all of it.
Well, let me tell you this. It's going to be a little different than facing a rookie quarterback. You are facing Kirk Cousins, who's put up big numbers this year. Thielen scores a touchdown every week. They got Justin Jefferson in his second year. And do we have an update on Dalvin Cook? I haven't seen one yet, but even his backup is good. Madison,
his backup's
right?
really good. So, Alexander Madison looked great last week.
So you're looking, I mean, just looking at the Vikings offense, I mean, it's going to be a tall task.
It is, Chud. I mean, here's what I think the trap is. You see, they're 0-2. They can't be any good, right? Oh, they lost to the Bengals. Well, yeah, they lost to the Bengals in overtime. So obviously they could have won that game. It's one play away. They're a missed 37-yard field goal from beating Arizona in Arizona week 2, right? And they beat a good Seahawks team on Sunday. So they could easily be 3-0, right? They're 2 plays away from being 3-0. And you're okay, well then that means they're pretty good. And I like Mike Zimmer as a coach. I really do. We can say where Kirk Cousins ranks among NFL players and how bad he is in prime time and all those things. I think he's thrown 8 touchdowns and no interceptions. I just read a story out of Minnesota. He's playing like an MVP, whether or not anybody wants to admit it. And he upset some people in Minnesota with his vaccine stance. So not everybody's cheering for him, but he's playing great. Like you mentioned, he's got weapons all around him. Whether or not, if Dalvin Cook plays, then, you know, they got a top 5 running back. They have 2 big-time receivers. Their tight end looked pretty good the other day. So, yeah, they're a formidable team. And it's interesting. I kind of, when the lines came out Sunday, you know, I get an email from one of those offshore betting sites. I assumed the Browns would be, 4-point favorites. It just felt like that because the Browns played so well against the Bears and they're 2-1, and we all know the hype around the Browns and the expectations. The first line I saw had Minnesota as a 1-point favorite. And I saw one today that had the Browns as a 1.5-point favorite. So my point is, this is going to be a close game, right? Vegas expects it to be a close game. I expect it to be a close game. The Browns don't have a huge edge on offense, right? And that's saying something because most teams the Browns go against, the Browns are so much more talented at receiver and running back and whatever. I mean, I'd give the Browns an edge at tight end. I'd give them an edge at running back because I love Nick Chubb and because Cook's hurt. But if Cook's healthy, Cook and Madison is not a huge drop-off from Chubb and Hunt. It is a drop-off, but it's not huge. I don't think Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins are really similar players. And it's just a matter of who plays better that day. I like the Browns' offensive line better, but the Vikings line is playing better than they thought it would at the beginning of the season. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a really good game. You know, I think the Browns' defense coming off that performance, you could argue, is probably better than Minnesota, but I don't think it's a huge difference. I mean, Minnesota's got players, Daniel Hunter, Everson Griffin. They got Sheldon Richardson coming off the bench on passing situations. The Browns know him. We know he's going to be motivated to try to go get Baker Mayfield at some point. You know, you got Eric Kendricks, Anthony Barr, if he's healthy, he's been dealing with something, but he practiced some last week. Nick Vigil, the other linebacker, had a pick six. Harrison Smith at safety. Like, I think they're a little bit susceptible at corner. Patrick Peterson isn't the same player that he used to be, but it's a good team, and it's going to be a really good matchup. And then you add on top of that the chess match between coaching staffs that know each other really well.
Well, you look at the defense. I'm glad you brought that up. And, they obviously have given up points. They lost 27-24 to the Bengals, 34-33 to the Cardinals. But they have the momentum on defense just like the Browns do, because they shut Seattle down in the second half last week and ended up beating them 30-17. So they're going to be riding in on a little wave.
They will. And, their defense played well, but the offense dominated the ball in the second half. And Russell Wilson didn't get many opportunities, which is a key. And if you're the Browns, you want the ball, right? So the Browns defense has to be able to get off the field so that Minnesota can't control the ball and dominate the ball, because I think that plays into the style of football they want to play, much like that's how the Browns want to play. Like, Mike Zimmer is a defensive guy who loves to run the ball, but he also has a good quarterback and a couple of outside receivers that are big-time weapons. So, like I said, it's almost a mirror image. I mean, I think he fired John DeFilippo as his offense coordinator in 2018, right? Stefanski took over right at the end of that season as coordinator because he wouldn't run the ball enough. Like, that's the mindset of Mike Zimmer. So the Browns are going to have to be aware of that. But on top of that, you have Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen running deep.
Yeah, so I looked at the line too, just like you did. I think I waited till Monday morning, but it was like early Monday morning, if you know what I mean. And I think it was like that 1 point Minnesota -1. And then yesterday I saw the back to the Browns -1.5, like you said. And then I just looked now while you were talking, and I see Browns -2.
Okay. So maybe people are thinking what I was thinking, right? But Vegas usually doesn't mess up those lines. So maybe they know something. I mean, a good team at home, home field advantage counts, when we talk about the spread. But my point is that they're a good team. Like, they're a playoff caliber team. Now, they don't always play like that, and that's the way the NFL works. And if you get, Kirk Cousins on a bad day and maybe you can get some pressure on him, but he made a really good throw. Like, the Seahawks brought, I think it was the Seahawks, maybe it was the Cardinals, one of the two games I watched late last night, but they brought all out pressure and he backpedals and threw this ball up in the air, and it looked like a kind of a dangerous play. And it was a perfect throw. His guy ran under the rainbow and they beat the blitz. He had a big scramble for a first down on one play I watched. So, he's not a top 5 quarterback, and he's, maybe overpaid given what they paid him. And he, hasn't had the success in the huge games that you'd want, but he can light it up on any given Sunday.
How about the NFL, though, in general? I mean, I was looking at it the other day and just thinking about this. After week 1, right, Pittsburgh looks like they're going to be pretty good. They beat Buffalo. The Browns almost beat Kansas City, but Kansas City wins. So Kansas City and Pittsburgh are both 1-0. Now they're both 1-2. They both lose 2 in a row. Who would have thought Vegas would be 3-0? The Broncos are 3-0. The Chargers beat Kansas City. They're 2-1. Buffalo looks great again after losing in week 1. I mean, this is going to be a roller coaster ride, and I just think the AFC is wide open.
Yeah, I agree with you. And, my natural response is you can't overreact to anything, right? And that goes for the Steelers looking great in week 1. Everybody's, they're still the Steelers. And now they're 1-2, and they lose to the Bengals. They're like, they're done. It's probably somewhere in the middle, right? The Steelers are probably going to come in at 9-8, right? Because that's the kind of team they feel like they are. They have such a good coaching staff and such a tradition there, and they played without TJ Watt last week. So, but yeah, that's how this league goes. People are ready to give up on Kansas City. I'm not ready to give up on Kansas City, So
no,
it's just a long time to go in this league. But that's one of the fun parts is that every week you feel like you know something else, and the question is, do you really know it? Or was it just, kind of a blip in a mirage that week?
Yeah, I'm going to stick with Kansas City and Buffalo are still the top 2 teams. The Browns and Ravens are, right there. I'm not ready to put. The Broncos have had kind of an easy schedule, I think. Mm-hmm. I'm not ready to put them in there, and we'll see with the Raiders. Tennessee back to 2-1. That, that's another example of a team people were probably freaking out about, and then they've had 2 really nice wins. So, it's going to be interesting. But all right, you ready to go prediction time?
Let's do it.
All right. Oh, before I do that, did you see the email that popped out? The Browns signed a cornerback to the practice squad.
Yeah, Herb Miller. Yeah, and it's interesting. They released Jordan Franks. Now, maybe they plan to bring him back, but they called him up. They elevated him from the practice squad to the active roster Saturday, and he played a little bit Sunday. It's just kind of an interesting move. Maybe it was all about special teams just for that week, and they're not worried about him being on the roster. Maybe they just were underwhelmed Sunday, but you would think the guy plays Sunday in the game, and then all of a sudden he's not on the practice squad even.
Yeah. All right, let's go to predictions. I think I made you go first last week, so you want me to go first this week?
Sure.
All right. So when I looked at the overall records and came to my final number, this was the one game that I was back and forth on as a pivotal game. And I did this with a few people at work. I did it with you, and most people picked the Browns to win this game. And when I looked at it, I was nervous about this game. And Scott, I can change my mind. It's only Tuesday, right? We're recording this on Tuesday. Sure. So I am allowed to change my mind. And if I do that, we will update that later in the week. But I have to give you one right now. And I just have a bad feeling that it's going to go not so good this week. Okay. And I'm going to go with the simple fact of I need to see the Browns beat a good team on the road before I'm going to predict them to do it. And you could come back and say, well, have some guts and, make that call. Well, I'm not ready to. So I'm going to go Vikings 27, Browns 24.
Well, I chuckle, Chud, and you'll find out why I chuckle in a second here. That's a completely reasonable pick. It's a completely reasonable explanation. I look at this schedule coming up. It's at Minnesota, at Chargers, home to Arizona, home to Broncos on Thursday night, home to Pittsburgh, right? That's a stretch. Yeah. That's a tough stretch. We're talking the meat of the schedule the Browns are starting to get into. I know there's, late in the season, they got those back-to-back with the Ravens that will probably determine the NFC North. But it feels like, okay, you got the first couple of games out of the way, right? We kind of predicted, everybody probably figured they'd be 2-1 and it would play out the way it did. Now you get into some games that are tougher to predict. Hold
on. I'm going to interrupt you.
Yeah.
Not everyone. A lot of people thought the Browns might beat the Chiefs.
Okay, but they were 6.5-point dogs or 7-point dogs, right? Like if you just go from a betting perspective, they would have been 2-1. But now it gets murkier, right?
Correct.
And I think it gets tougher for me to predict.
This is the toughest game to predict, right?
Yeah,
is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I think the same will be said for the next 4 or 5 weeks. The game in LA is going to be hard. Arizona's a good team. Denver's, they're probably better than Denver, but Denver's 3-0. It's a primetime game. Pittsburgh's Pittsburgh, right? So my point is, I think we're going to learn a lot about the Browns over the next, let's say, 5 games. I think you're really going to say, okay, are they a 12 or 13 win team? Are they, do they look more like a wild card team? Not that everything's defined by week 7 or 8, but you're almost halfway through the season, right? So my point is, this starts a really important stretch for the Browns, and it's going to be a difficult game for all the reasons we laid out. But I'm going to go Browns, and I'm going to take your score, which is what I have written down. I'm going to go 27-24 Browns. I think it's a really close game. I think it could come, it could be decided by turnovers. I just kind of like the Stefanski back to Minnesota. I like the Browns defense having the confidence it gained from a week ago. I think Baker will probably throw it more accurately than he did last week because he missed some throws, and it's just kind of the natural ebb and flow of a season. And I would give just the Browns a slight edge on defense, and I think they're going to be able to score the ball a little bit. So I'm going to go 27-24. I think it'll be a really good game.
That's pretty funny. Same score, different team.
Yeah. I got the Browns going 12-5, right? So they got to win some of these games. Like among this 5-game stretch, they probably have to go 3-2 or 4-1 to kind of get where I think they're going to go.
Yeah, and I think we played the schedule game, and you had them winning, obviously, a lot of those games because you only have them. What'd you have them 12-5,
12-5, right? So
Yeah.
I mean, I probably had them beating Minnesota and losing to LA. The Chargers. Figure they'll lose one of those games. So I mean, it could happen, and they could flip flop them. But the more of these big games they win, the more of these big on the road games they win. I just think it gives them more confidence, and it really established them as the team I think, and a lot of people think they are.
Yeah. And I think it goes back to your point. I didn't think they would beat Kansas City, and I didn't really sit there and say, oh, they might. I really didn't think that they might lose the next two games. So to go to your point, this is the first game where I think you really sit there and go, yeah, it could go either way. I mean, I think we both think that. There's probably a lot of people that don't. Listen, if the Browns team that played in the first half in Kansas City, or the team that played in the second half last week, and if that team shows up, well, yeah, I mean, absolutely they can win on the road in Minnesota.
Sure.
There's no question about it. But if the other team that we've seen a few times here this year, and if Cousins and that offense gets going, that's my concern.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people in Minnesota saying, well, if the Vikings play like they did in the second half against Seattle, nobody's going to beat them, right? I mean, that's how the league is. But I think the Browns and the Vikings are pretty similar teams. I'd give a slight edge to the Browns, which is why I'm giving them a slight edge Sunday.
Yeah, well, if it was in Cleveland, I would pick the Browns.
Yeah, I hear you.
So, yeah.
Cool. Well, hey, Chud, this has been great. Another jam-packed episode. I really appreciate it, and we'll check in again next week. Thanks so much for the time. Thanks, everybody, for listening, and you can read all my stories at brownzone.com. This has been the latest episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. Thank you very much.